Hi everyone, welcome back to another video for Phantasy Star Online-related New Genesis. So today I'm going to kind of retrace some steps that I did in a previous video, which was covering the topic of rare drops in the Phantasy Star series. And I want to relate it to some recent weapon series and armor series that we've had in NGS. And what I want to talk about is whether I think these are too rare, whether I think that having these chase items that are hard to get is a good thing for the game or a bad thing, and kind of my perspective on the matter as someone who's played since PSO. So just to recap for anyone who might not be aware, the recent weapon series that we've had added to the game, most people I would imagine at this point are probably still using the Acrocelio gear, myself included. Acrocelio is the final step of the upgrade path that starts with Excelio, then it goes to Duocelio, Tricelio, Acrocelio. And the same for the armors as well. I would imagine most people are probably using Acrotasis armors, which are upgrades from Ectasis armors, which upgrade to Dustasis to Tristasis. So I'd imagine that's what most people who are at a higher level in the game are using at the moment. But we do have a few extra weapon series and an armor series that have been added more recently that are either side grades or slight upgrades to the Acro gear. But the commonality between them all is that they're all quite hard to get. So for weapon side, we have the 12-star Twaalv weapons. We also have the Legend 1 Legendios weapons.
Hello there.
Thanks to that guy for just running past in the middle of recording. We also have the new 13-star Cres series as well, which are, at the moment of recording, are only obtainable from Malignant Dartfall's Vial. We also have on the armor side, we have the 12-star Pro Grade armors as well. Now, all of these are fairly difficult to get, some more so than others, but they are definitely not easy drops. So, what do I think of this? Do I think this is a good direction for NGS to go in? So I think first we need to look back at some of the early games and just see how they did it. So if we go back to the first Phantasy Star Online, and for this we'll count any of the versions of PSO because they all were kind of similar. In those games, there were quite a wide variety of different rare items in the game. It's not like NGS where there is a couple of series at a time. You know, in NGS really we don't have that wider variety of gear to use. We tend to be locked into specific upgrade paths, and the difference between players will quite often be what augments you decide to go with, or what tech customizations you go with. The actual gear itself is generally quite restricted. In PSO, it was a lot more open. In regards to the actual rarity itself, it varied a lot in PSO, so you had things that would drop all the time. You know, things like your DB Sabers, your Flowing Swords, your Varistas, things like that, your Disco Bravemans, they would all drop quite often generally. Then I like to think that there was a tier sort of in the middle that would drop infrequently, but you'd get them now and again. So that would be things like Chainsword, Soul Banish, things like that. And then at the top end, you had your Uber Rares that were essentially unobtainable, and you might see one or two of them if you're lucky in your entire playtime. So that is things like your Psycho ones, your Lavis Cannons, your Sealed J Swords, things like that. So the way PSO did it was really good because you had a lot of options for a different upgrade path as you were building your character, and there was gear that was perfectly good to use that was not massively rare, so you could gear your character pretty well, and then that set you up for then the end game of PSO, which was hunting that really rare stuff and trying to find the absolute best gear. So that's kind of how PSO did it. Just as a reminder, some of the kind of drops that you were looking for in PSO, you know, some of your rarest drops in PSO, even in the later versions where the drop rates were easier, you were looking at some drops for Psycho ones, for example, was 1 in 205 from an enemy that only appears at 1 in 500 rate, or 1 in, you know, several 100,000 from some other enemies. It was incredibly difficult. The likelihood is that you probably wouldn't see a lot of these items, but they gave you something to kind of work towards. And other games in the series have worked kind of similar, although maybe not to the same extremity as PSO. I feel a lot of the other games, typically the drops weren't as hard as PSO. The only exception to that I can maybe think of is maybe Phantasy Star Zero, because I know Zero does have some very, very rare drops. And that game is kind of like almost like a spiritual successor anyway. I mean, it takes place in the same timeline anyway. So how do I feel it is in NGS currently? Well, For the most part, I quite like having these chase weapons. I think that they do give you something to kind of work towards. And particularly at the moment, when the 13 stars are only available through Malignant Vial, it does mean that it makes you kind of want to do Malignant Vial to have a chance of getting them. Now, yes, I have no doubt these 13 stars will be rolled out across other quests later. I imagine when we eventually get an 8-player version of Malignant Vial, they'll probably drop there. And I would imagine in time, LTQs and things will drop them as well. But we've got that initial period where these 13 star weapons are only available through Malignant Vial, which means you have to really kind of push yourself to be able to want to go for them, because Malignant Vial is no joke. Malignant Vial is a very difficult fight, but if you want those 13 stars, you have to work for them. And I don't really know what the drop rate is like necessarily, because we don't really have access to any kind of drop rate data for NGS, unfortunately. It does seem like people are getting them not particularly difficult, I would say. I've seen a few people who've had them already. There's a few in the player shops. And given how many people are actually clearing Malignant Vial, maybe they're a bit of an easier drop than we think they are. The difficulty with that is actually beating Malignant Vial in the first place. For the other series, things like Legendios, it does seem to me at least like they are very rare. I certainly haven't seen a Legendios drop at all. I also haven't seen a Twaalv drop either. I think I am in the minority for this. I feel like everyone else is getting them, but yeah, I have not seen a Twaalv or a Legendios drop yet. So they do seem very rare. I do like this because, as you'll know with the Acrocelio gear that we've got at the moment, that is totally fine gear to use at endgame. You know, it will carry you through to things like Malignant Vial. It is totally fine to use. It has really good abilities. It's strong enough. So I like that they've given you this gear. This kind of reminds me of the sort of mid-rarity stuff from PSO. The stuff that was good enough to carry you to the end, but wasn't the uber rare stuff. And that kind of reminds me of what the Acrocelio is doing at the moment. So I like that we've got an option for Acrocelio. I also like that you don't have to just be lucky for Acrocelio. All you have to do is just put the work in and get the materials, and you can just get it over time by just gathering those materials up and upgrading gradually. And I do like that. But I also do like that we do have these very rare series as well that actually have some rarity associated with them. And the great thing is, because of how NGS works, if you do get one of them and you don't like it, or it's a class you don't use, you can sell them on the player shops and make a load of money. I mean, the 13-star Cres weapons at the moment are selling for a fortune, so if you do get one, even if it's for a class you don't use, you're going to hit big by selling it in your player shop anywhere. So I do like that NGS is doing this, and I hope it's something they continue to do going forward. Now, again, we know that the Cres weapons are probably going to be made more widely available later down the line once we get the 8-player version of Vial and other quests. But it's nice to have this period where it's like an exclusivity period where people who've been able to beat Malignant Vial have a chance of getting this and can profit from it, because I feel that if you're good enough to beat Malignant Vial, you should be able to profit off the drops that you get. That's kind of how I say it. I, for the record, am not good enough to beat Malignant Vial yet. I have still yet to beat it, so I don't have any Cres weapons. But I still think that's a good idea. Now, of course, there are some downsides with the way that NGS does this. You know, the obvious one should be that if you're not lucky, then you're not getting these drops. Now, that has been a thing since PSO. You know, if you weren't lucky, you weren't going to find some of this gear. That has been a thing that has persisted with the games for years and years and years. Unfortunately, RNG does come into it. There is not a whole lot you can do about that. However, I think one problem that we do have at the moment with the way that NGS does it is the progression of the gear, I think, is a bit too quick at the moment. For me, it was kind of cool when we got the Legendios weapons, and even with Twaalv as well, because Twaalv was kind of like almost like a side grade to Acrocelio anywhere. So it, you know, catered to different playstyles. I think with the Legendios is a really cool idea, but unfortunately it didn't really get its time in the sun. It felt like we got Legendios and then almost immediately got the 13-star Cres series, which are stronger than it. So I think that if we are doing this with these chase rare weapons where they are quite hard to get, I think we need a bit of a longer period between getting upgrades, because if I'd been farming for a Legendios, I'd probably be quite annoyed now that we've already got a Cres series that, you know, outperforms it. That said, if a Legendios dropped for me now, I'd be happy with it because I don't have one, and it's just cool to get something new. But I do feel like we've moved on to 13-star a bit too quick. Now, we do know that I think the Legendios series at some point is apparently going to get some kind of upgrades anyway, so maybe that'll bring it back into line with the 13 stars and make it more relevant again. But yeah, I just feel that the way that they handled the release schedule of the Legendios and then the Cres weapons was a bit too cramped together. So I think SEGA need to be a bit more careful with how they schedule the sort of gear upgrade paths. I think you need enough time for people to farm for something. Don't leave it too long because people will get bored of it. But you don't want to be upgrading and then adding a new series that replaces it straight away. It kind of takes away the point of farming for it in the first place. Now, for the record, because I know people like to shit on NGS as well, for the record, PSO did this as well. So when PSO Blueburst launched, it added a load of new gear to the game, which made a lot of the episode 1 and 2 stuff completely irrelevant. Example of this is Lavis Cannon in PSO. Lavis Cannon was a pretty strong saber with a interesting, if kind of useless special that would fire like a piercing beam. It was a really cool weapon. You could upgrade it into different weapons and so on. But Lavis Cannon itself, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think it was the strongest saber in PSO in episode 1 and 2. When episode 4 launched with Blueburst, we got a new saber called Excalibur, which was way stronger than Lavis Cannon, hit 3 targets instead of 1, had a berserk special, and was way easier to get than Lavis Cannon. At that point, why are you going to use Lavis Cannon? The answer, of course, is because Lavis Cannon is fashion and looks cool, but mechanically there was no reason you would use Lavis over Excalibur. They also did it with some other weapons as well. There was a lot of evidence in PSO of them doing this, particularly with Blueburst, where they would launch gear in episode 4 that would just completely make early gear totally irrelevant. Another example is Sango Nyasha. Sango Nyasha was the strongest twin swords in episode 1 and 2. Then they added Jizai in episode 4, which was way stronger and had a much more useful special. So again, at that point, why are you going to use Sango Nyasha? Again, the answer is because it looks cool. But you get my point. This is not the first time a Phantasy Star game has done this. So if you're thinking that NGS is making gear irrelevant too quickly, bear in mind that PSO also did it. Now, yes, obviously with PSO, Blueburst didn't come along until the mid-2000s, so you did have a few years of enjoying things like your Lavis Cannons and so on. But once Blueburst landed, there was a massive shift in the meta of gear to use, so just bear that in mind if you are considering that this might be a new thing for NGS, because I'm telling you now, it is not. So overall, what are my hopes for Rare Drops and NGS going forward? First of all, and I think a lot of people probably feel the same here, I do want to see more variants in the rares. I'd like to see some more unique weapons. Again, I mentioned this last time, but NGS very heavily relies on these weapons series, where a new series will get added and every weapon has a weapon in that series. And I get that that's so annoying if it feels left out. I get that. But it would be nice to have a bit more variety between the weapons. We have had that a little bit with things like the Relic and the Melek series, where although they were a series, the individual weapons look quite different. They were all based on early weapons, which was cool. I do feel we need more of that though. I also feel that weapons need slightly more interesting potentials. Now, we have had some more interesting ones recently, particularly with things like Legendios. So I think we are moving in that direction now, which is good. We just need to kind of move away from this thing in NGS of having weapons that are just pure stat sticks that just give you potency and not much else. Thankfully, though, I do feel like we are gradually moving away from that, which is good. Going forward, I'd also like to see them, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to see a better schedule on the distribution of rare drops. So we've just got 13 star, so I don't want to tune into next month's headline and see that we're getting 14 stars, because that would be way too fast. So I'd like to see us now run with 13 stars personally for at least a couple of months. Give us a few different 13 star series, give us some different 13 star weapons for sure. Don't just have Cres, give us a few different series options. Give us another Legend series that sort of coincides with 13 star. That's roughly equal to it. That would be cool. But I don't think we need to be advancing from 13 star for a long time yet. We need to sort of sit on 13 star for a while now, I think. Again, that doesn't mean just sitting on one weapon series. It means sitting at 13 star rarity, giving us different options to use in that rarity for different playstyles. That's how I see it, and that's what I'd like to see going forward. Now, would I like to see anything on the scale of rarity of PSO? You know, we're talking like your 1 in 300k cycle ones here. I think honestly, a lot of people just probably don't have the time for that kind of rare hunt anymore. With PSO, I guess what you got was a finished game. So you could pick something and just grind towards it and know that that was the best thing in the game for your class. So, you know that if you're going for a Psycho one, that is one of the best force weapons in the game. That will never change. So you could justify hunting it a bit more. In NGS, I feel like it's hard to justify, but I would still like to see some decently rare drops in the game, you know, and I feel like we are doing that now with the Legendios and the Cres series and so on. So overall, I do think we are moving in the right direction with NGS in regards to rare drops, but I would like to see, as I said, more variety in the rares, and just rares that cater to a few different playstyles. I think Legendios was a good start with that, with its quite unique potential, but give us more. So yeah, I think I'll wrap that one up there for today. If you have any questions or anything, please do leave them in the comments below. I do try and answer what I can. If you enjoyed the video, please consider either leaving a like or subscribe to the channel if you want to. I do also have a Twitch channel, which is SectionSkyly, and I tend to stream twice a week on Wednesdays and Sundays. I also have an X and a Bluesky, they're both SectionSkyly, and you can also follow join my Discord as well, which there'll be a link to in the description as well, so feel free to join us over there. But yeah, whatever you're doing in NGS, I hope you're having a good week, and I'll see you guys next time.